Okay, hi everyone, I'm BINGZ and this is Sandy Freshie. And Sandy Freshie is my human design mentor. So since early this year, I've been having monthly mentoring sessions from her. And we just one day we just got into this chat about connection, vulnerability, and empathy. And also after reading about Brene and watching her TED Talk on vulnerability, I just got really, really excited on how this is all can be connected to human design and how human design can be used as a tool to help us be more courageous, to understand our blocks that we have in allowing us to move on to being more vulnerable and in connecting with others. So here we are and sharing our insights. So Sandy, do you want to add on?
Yeah, it's been really a pleasure to unwrap this with you. And just by way of introduction, I'm Sandy Freshie. I'm a human design specialist, and it's been a pleasure also mentoring you, BINGZ. So the way that this conversation has started to go is really interesting, and I think that the people who watch this and that we share this with will find it interesting as well.
Yeah, okay. So let's move on to share what we have discussed so far. So I really like this quotation by Brene Brown. She says that we are really hardwired to connect with others, and it's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives, and without that, there is suffering. Without it, there's suffering. So we really see that from the charts, in our human design charts. Especially, we will talk about open centers. What does it mean by having undefined open centers where we have empathy there? And also our consistent personality, which is in our defined centers. So do you want to add on, Sandy?
Yeah. When I read this quote, when you shared this quote with me, and I love how you circled connect there. We are hardwired to connect, and that's what human design shows us. It shows us how we're hardwired to connect to ourselves and then to others in relationship and to ourselves. And it also is showing us how we can begin to transcend suffering by our connections. And it just makes perfect sense that you were inspired by this particular quote from her.
Yeah, so let's talk about you as having this question in your mind as you work with clients who are natural empaths, right?
Yeah. Well, we both work with empaths, and the point that I brought up with this question is, or the observation I brought up with this question about how do we live in a world of uncertainty and change and still have empathy for others. I observe that, and I'm sure everybody we've talked to is observing how our world is moving so quickly and changing so quickly that there is this sense of uncertainty, because as soon as we feel like we've made a change, then there's another change that has to be made. And that can make us feel, or a lot of times, especially those of us who are empathic, the clients that we work with who are empathic and open and sensitive, can feel like the ground beneath them is very shaky because of that. And that affects our ability and their ability at times to have empathy for other people. So I know that's the crux of your work. It's the crux of my work of how do we connect with others? How do we transcend suffering? How do we connect with ourselves so that we can stay in this place of empathy, even if it seems like the ground is moving beneath our feet all the time?
Yes, I work with clients who suffer from anxiety and overwhelm, and are relationships that they don't feel safe to be in. So the theme that I'm getting in my healing sessions would be actually helping them to feel safe and loved in spite of everything that they can't control in their relationships and the way their lives turn out. and really still have the courage to feeling safe and loved to still continue to be themselves in front of others as well.
Yeah, yeah, being yourself in spite of what's going on outside of you. And that's what I do as well with my clients. And I do it from that very mechanical human design point of view. But for me, it's that foundation of how can you stay in your own sense of self and in your own ability to be grounded, regardless of what's shifting and changing around you, regardless of who is shifting and changing around you and how that's affecting you.
Yes. So maybe Sandy, can you explain this?
Yeah,
this
sure.
part about human design?
Yeah, so that's the human design chart over there on the left side of that slide. So just briefly, if you have white areas on your human design chart, and everybody does, especially those shapes, which are your energy centers, then that means that you are open or undefined there. For the purposes of our discussion today, we're not going to get into the technical differences between open and undefined, because in the context of vulnerability, we're really talking about openness in general. So we're going to refer to them as open centers. So what we sense through our open centers mechanically is other people's or outside energy. Other people's energy and outside energy that are coming to us either through maybe someone who has that center colored in, or this is a little bit beyond the basics, but through the astrological transits and how that affects our chart, or how that affects our design. So when we're taking that energy in through our openness, what happens is that we feel it very deeply. It gets kind of amplified within us. And just like when you're yelling in a bucket or yelling in a cave or something like that, the sound that comes back to you is often very distorted. And that's the same way that these open centers work. You know, what you're taking in is like someone yelling into the cave, and what's coming out is not exactly what went in a lot of times. So it can be interpreted in a very distorted, what you're feeling can be interpreted in a very distorted way. And this kind of way that you're affected through your openness starts before you're even born. And there's an aspect on your human design chart that shows you the imprints and what we call conditioning in human design, what you were imprinted with, what you were affected by while you were developing in the womb. So what you're taking in, what you're amplifying, what you're distorting started then. You're being conditioned by it. You are feeling it deeply even before you're born, and then it gets reinforced and more is added on as you are raised in the family that you're raised in, as you go to school, as you're exposed to different people who have an impact on you. So you have layers and layers and layers of influences that sometimes can build up over time. So because we do need to be vulnerable to connect with other people with honest two-way communication, we have to start to release that past conditioning, those beginning layers, and it takes time. You know, and just to clarify, what I'm talking about with conditioning are things like limiting beliefs, being very reactive to what it is that you're feeling, what's coming at you, what you're taking in to your openness, being reactive to how you're interpreting it, and that can ultimately show up in unhealthy behaviors. Unhealthy behavior patterns, unhealthy thought patterns, those kinds of things. So those are the things that keep us from really feeling and understanding the gifts of our vulnerability in those open centers, or the gift of vulnerability that we can feel through our openness, that we can work with through our openness. Because we're dealing with these layers and layers of distortions from today probably and all the way back to the time before we were born. Do you have anything to add to that? Did I kind of explain it without?
Yeah. I think maybe one more common example I can think of is emotional eating as a reactionary behavior. So Maybe an example is if you are open to feeling other people's emotions, and how do you deal with it in the first place? Some people are conditioned that they react by eating some chocolate. So this is an example of reactionary pattern. And all this can be released actually once we have a deeper awareness of where we're open and how we react to all these amplified energies.
Mm-hmm. And what our patterns are, what our behaviors are that show us when we're shutting down, or what our
Yes.
beliefs are, and how that translates into behaviors. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important to see that if we can master our responses to our open centers, where we feel the energies in an amplified manner, and if we can continue to keep them open, then we can master our really truly connecting with others, seeing who people actually are truly instead of our false impressions of them, and practice and having the courage to be vulnerable, and through that have empathy to connect with others, to really feel their pains, their dreams, their desires. And I think, yeah, this is what life is all about, right?
It sure is. And
Yeah.
especially if you have a lot of those white areas in your chart, a lot of openness, that's what you're here for. That's what
Yes.
well, I have a lot of openness, so that's what I'm here for, is to feel that and to be with it, and to really use that empathy as a point of connection, a way to connect with others. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about vulnerability. Um, so Brene Brown is the famous person talking about vulnerability and really bring us to valuing vulnerability in society. And I love the way she summarizes it. It's actually uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So do you want to talk about that, Sandy?
Yeah, well, first of all, just by background of our conversation that led to this, you really had a great insight about the three awareness centers in the human design body graph, and how they relate to uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So that's really what we want to share with you today, and we're going to try to make it as simple as possible. So should we start at the top with the ajna and uncertainty?
Yeah. So ajna is our mind center. So it's about uncertainty, mental uncertainty. And we all know that we can plan as much as we want for our entire lives. Um, who do I want to become? What income level? How many kids do we want? But there's way too many variables for us to control everything. So life is truly uncertain. And for people who are open in this center, you can even sense it in an amplified manner where you're reading the thoughts of others, and if you're not aware, you may confuse it as your own, and that can make navigating life mentally even more difficult for you, I guess. So do you want to talk more on this?
Yeah, and the term that comes to mind when I think about the open ajna, now this one's colored in because if we were reading the chart, it would be known as defined, but we have them colored in so you can see them. When we're talking about the open ajna, the thing that comes to mind is changing your mind all the time. You have this ability to be very open-minded, but you also have the ability to change your mind a lot. And like you said, your decisions are not meant to be made at the level of your thoughts and your ideas. Life is not meant to be lived there. And if you're trying to make your decisions so that you can be certain about your future from this place of your thoughts and not really listening to your inner authority, as we call it in human design, that place within you that is your truth finder in your body, then you're going to create actually more uncertainty for yourself. So we could talk for days on all three of these centers, but I think I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, so let's go to the spleen. This is where I see Brene Brown describe risk in. So the spleen is our center where we have our fear, our instincts, whether to fight, flee, freeze, whether to take that step forward or to stop or to hide. And people who are defined in this center actually have their decision-making authority there. So they are designed to listen to that small voice, and so they know whether to actually take that step forward or to stop or to just forget and do something else. And so whenever you listen to that small voice, you become vitally healthy, and
you tap into that vitality. And the thing about the spleen, when it's defined, is that you have a sense of well-being and a sense of safety that someone with an undefined spleen doesn't necessarily have on a consistent basis. But there's also this theme that runs with the spleen, because it's kind of hardwired into our physicality and our physical experience. You know, it's actually the oldest awareness center in the body. So this is kind of what we have in common with the other mammals on the planet. And if you watch wild animals and you watch big cats hunting in Africa, you know, or your house cat, you know that they know in the moment when to go, when it's healthy, when to stop, when to avoid that thing that's not safe. But we as humans have this other layer of consciousness that comes with the spleen, so that we sometimes experience the spleen through the lens of fear. So there is fear that our minds attach meaning to and label and whatever, that can hold us back, whether you're defined or undefined. And if you're undefined, if you're open in the spleen, you can really amplify that fear. And you have an example of that, of your children. You want to share it now?
Oh, yes. So my kids have defined spleens. So they're designed to follow their instincts, and I have an open spleen. So I get really fearful when they do dangerous things like crossing the road, potentially dangerous things. And I can really overreact when they get hurt. But they're fine. They're following their instincts. They know when's the right time to take a step forward, and they don't understand why I'm being so fearful. So that is the good thing if you are aware of your own internal, what we call the caveman instincts, and you just take step by step, listen to that subtle voice and allow that to navigate your life step by step. But as we grow older, sometimes even if you have a defined spleen, you may override that, especially when you become too mentally conscious. Maybe that is why we have experienced a high rate of doctor's visits due to stress, because many people are actually unaligned here. They are misaligned in the way they listen to that small voice.
Yeah.
And people who are open here, they amplify that misalignment, and that causes even more fears that stop us from taking the right step forward.
Yeah. And you know, if you're open in the spleen, your small voice is actually not coming to you through the spleen. It's not coming to you in the moment, because your authority, your way that you know what's right for you and make decisions that are right for you, have a different timing. And only the people with a defined spleen know right there in the moment whether something is good for them or not. But if you have another kind of authority, which is really something that's more appropriate for further investigation of your own chart, but just in a nutshell, if you have another kind of authority, if you have an open spleen, you have another kind of authority. Let's put it that way. And all of those other authorities are waiting for some kind of a different kind of timing to know when to move, when to take action, when to make a decision. So it's their voice, their still small voice is not in the spleen. And what they're feeling is fear, or they can feel fear or insecurity, if they aren't really allowing themselves to take the risk in the way that they're designed to take risks, and to listen to themselves in the way that they're designed to listen to themselves.
Yes. And we can see another type of authority is actually in our emotional solar plexus. So I guess this takes people who are defined here, they need to really take their time to feel through their emotional ups and downs so that they have clarity on how to make their own right decision. And for people, it can be really uncomfortable to feel like you do have your own moods regardless of what's happening in your life. You do have your own ups and downs. And that can feel vulnerable to really accept that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're defined there, you have to take your time and be aware at each moment over time how you're feeling emotionally. If you're open, it's a whole other ball game because most people who identify as empathic have an open emotional solar plexus. Half of the people on the planet have an open emotional solar plexus. So what that means is that you really do feel the emotions of other people. And remember, we were talking about how all of the open centers are places where you take that energy in and you feel it in a very amplified way and you distort it. So it's not surprising to me that, there's a lot of arguments that happen on the planet and in relationships and all of that, because that open emotional center is so sensitive to what the truly emotional person, the one who has that fixed sense of their own emotions, that fixed wave of their own emotions, what they're feeling. And I'm undefined there, so I'll give a practical example here of what that can be about. I've had to work a long time to understand that I don't need to take care of someone else's emotions. And my husband is my teacher, I guess you would say, because he's defined emotionally. And when we first got married, it was very hard for me not to take things personally. He would have a bad day. He would have his own cycles of emotion. And, he would be in a down mood or a low mood. And I would think that he was mad at me because I was feeling what he was feeling. And I was amplifying it. I was obviously distorting it. And because of the way that I was conditioned in the past and what I was feeling, I immediately assumed that he was mad at me. And then that would set off all kinds of misunderstandings. And then, the other way that happens a lot, or used to happen a lot with me, is that I would be afraid of conflict. And I wouldn't want to tell certain people or confront certain people with things because I knew I was really going to feel their negative emotions very deeply. And this, I think, of all of these three centers, this one, in terms of vulnerability, is probably the most powerful one. There's just this potential when you're open there to just shut everything down. You shut yourself down, and then maybe even shut the other person down so that you don't have to feel their feelings. Shut their feelings down too. I mean, it's just that powerful. And on the flip side of that, this is truly a gift to have an open emotional center, to have an open emotional solar plexus, because when you know how to be there and keep it open and be vulnerable and still have your own grounding and footing beneath you, being your own self, it can be a gift of healing, not only for yourself, but for the other person, just to be there and be that presence without taking on their emotions and somehow interpreting them in an inaccurate way and reacting to it.
Yes, I think you said something that really hit me. I think you said you realize that you don't have to be responsible for taking care of another person's emotions. So I think maybe that a lot of people confuse empathy with really wanting to take care of someone's emotions. But it's really not. It's just being present for the other person and for yourself, holding space and not denying and not taking it all in as well. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful example.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
For myself, I've always been uncomfortable with anger. And you know, kids have tantrums. They don't hide. So I find myself actually being aggressive when I try to shut down their tantrums, their temper tantrums. And that's when I feel my armor coming up, not wanting to be vulnerable to their anger. So when I have this awareness that I do amplify their emotions, then it actually helps me to understand and helps me to mindfully release some of that armor so that I can be a better parent and have more empathy for their anger, to teach them how to acknowledge their emotions.
Yeah.
And
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking about how even in the spleen and the ajna, there's a tendency to want to shut down, like in the example you gave with your kids and feeling fearful that they were going to hurt themselves, or there's this reaction that we can have in that center to want to shut other people down because of the fear that you have. That one is defined for me. So the fear that you have and other people have who are open, or to shut yourself down because of that fear that you have, to paralyze yourself because of this fear that's ever shifting and ever changing, because when you're open, you have these shifting and changing experiences, to just kind of shut your whole self down because you don't know what you're going to be fearful about next. And I think in the ajna, it's the same kind of, sort of the same kind of thing, because one thing that happens with people with an open ajna, neither of us have an open ajna, so I'm just saying from observation, is that there can be a tendency to want to shut your mind down, or to want to shut your perspective or get rigid with your perspective and your beliefs because you feel so much mental uncertainty, or to try to get other people to believe what you believe because you're holding on to your belief system so tightly. And that can really shut down that ability to have an open mind and to entertain the ideas and the thoughts of other people in an open way. So that's what came to me as you were talking about the solar plexus.
yeah, okay. So I think having an open mind feels like you're in a vast open field where you can go in any direction, and that can freak people out.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of us prefer to live lives with corridors, with properly segregated corridors, and walk that line. And sometimes we feel that line because we've been conditioned, and when we live with our parents, this is how they think, so we have that kind of borders. But especially when we move out of their homes, suddenly life is an open field, and we can get really uncomfortable and try to squeeze ourselves back again. And this is how conditioning happens, awareness of conditioning happens.
Mm-hmm.
That is where we need to have the courage to release that conditioning, so we are more aligned to who we really are, to our gift of holding possibilities. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move on to, we're just showing our chart. So this is mine, this is Sandy's, and how we can actually, our charts interact. Maybe Sandy, you want to point out how our charts interact?
Yeah, just very quickly, because we kind of talked about some of the examples already, but just pointing out that I have a defined spleen here, and BINGZ has an undefined spleen. So if we were to spend any amount of time together in the same room, I mean, we spend time online, but you could be pulling me out of the middle of the street like you do your children.
Yeah.
Or you could be taking in some of the energies that could be interpreted as fear through the definition, the gates, and everything that are on my spleen, and really react to that and get paralyzed in that. Or you could, there's another dynamic with this where you could get very clingy because I'm holding that consistent vitality, that consistent knowing here that all is well. And a lot of times that feels really good to people who have an undefined spleen. So you could get really clingy and not want to
Let go.
have that let go. Yeah. So, watch out with your children, because I bet when they get a little bit older, you may have a hard time letting them fly from the nest when they're ready to go. You may not, now that you're aware of it.
And now that I think of it, yes, I get attachment issues. Like I'm the one refusing to let go of them.
Yeah, and it's just that energetic, the way that the energy comes together and how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So let's just move on to reiterating this. So we are really hardwired to connect with others. And this is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives, when we really realign to our charts and live according to the design of our individual charts, and really feel the openness through our our undefined open centers. So we have a true connection, a true interaction with our loved ones, with others.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is what we want to ask you. So this is the definition that Brene Brown has with vulnerability. So where are you feeling it? Where are you feeling the challenges? Is it through feeling mental uncertainty? Yeah, uncomfortable with taking healthy risks? You're uncomfortable with emotions, with emotional pressure that keep you from connecting authentically with others.
Yes.
So we would love to know, and we would love to continue this conversation, so that collectively we can help to improve the way we connect with others, and we can have more courage to be vulnerable in front of others. Yeah. Sandy, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just to reiterate that, this is the beginning of a conversation, and we really would love to know the challenges that you have with feeling the mental uncertainty, with taking healthy risks, with feeling emotionally exposed, and how that really keeps you from connecting. And feel free to comment wherever there's a comment space with this video, and we'll engage in that conversation with you as we move along.
Okay, cool. So thank you everybody for watching this, and we hope to have your input. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.